Welcome to Biota Live. I'm Tom Barbalet, and this is a continuation of the Biota podcasts. For more information on the Biota podcasts, check out biota.org/podcast. This is a special Biota Live being recorded on Saturday morning, November 7th, 2009, currently at 10 a.m. Pacific. And we're calling this call specifically because of the success of the Artificial Life Workgroup. Now, for folks who tuned into the last live Biota Live with Mark Badeau, you'll be familiar with the stuff that Mark and I talked about setting up a work group to tackle some of the important issues in artificial life, what we're calling the value problem, i.e. explaining the value of artificial life to an external observer, but also issues that have arisen with regards to the industrial and academic use of artificial life, how we can kind of grow the community, get a better sense of the community, and also outreach to the media, which is something that we discussed in the last Biota Live, but has really built up a following and some discussion through the work group that was created soon after the call with Mark last time. So we have a number of people on the call. I want to just introduce the first from identified only as Southern Indiana. Hello, caller.
Oh, hi, Tom. It's Larry Yeager.
Oh, Larry, wonderful to have you on. Wonderful to have you on. We also have on Bruce Damer.
Hi, Bruce.
Hi, Larry. Hi, Tom. Hi. Hello, everyone.
So, Larry, I'm assuming you heard the last Biota Live with Mark Badeau, and it's certainly a topic that we had discussed previously. What are your current thoughts with regards to the formation of the Artificial Life Work Group, and what would you like to see come from the work group?
I just basically like the ideas that were put forward for the work group, the idea that this is allowing sort of a common resource available to the community, available to people interested in the community. It's nice to be able to point to a place and say, here's what we do, and here's what we contribute to science in general, and even just the listing of all the academic units that have good research programs in these things, I think is of value. There's a lot of interest in this area from students coming up, but what they sometimes have trouble finding is a good place to pursue those interests. And so this common resource for the community, I think, is a really good idea.
Certainly. Well, we have Oliver in the chat room who joined the Artificial Life Work Group, but I believe Oliver's 17 and looking for artificial life-related study paths in university in Canada. And I said that certainly there are a couple of universities in Canada that already had artificial life courses, but this, as you say, is just based on my own knowledge. And it would be wonderful to have a resource for people like Oliver in particular who are getting to that university age that they could see, well, I can take some courses here, or here's how I structure an artificial life focused degree. I mean, you must get this kind of correspondence all the time, Larry.
I do get students from all over the world interested in these topics, and it's because they've happened to have stumbled across a web page somewhere. I mean, and I do, maintain my own web page, and I have web pages through the university, Indiana University, and so it can be found. We've got good, powerful search engines these days, but it's still nice to have a more uniform resource where you can look over the different opportunities and a focused thematic resource as opposed to just a random web search.
Certainly. As I noted with the chat with Mark Badeau, I found a university in Arizona that had just opened an artificial life course which looked more like a game development course but was being called an artificial life course. And I think the ability of the community to unify basically a definition, because a large portion of the initial problem is people may find the site associated with artificial life, but fitting it into a broader context about what artificial life is, and also with courses being taught that are kind of giving a diverging set of definitions associated with that. You teach artificial life courses, Larry. How do you start unifying a group of students to come together with regards to what artificial life is?
Well, I suppose the first thing I should say in response to that is that one of the only tenets of the current workgroup proposal is a standardization of such things, a standardization of the approach to education and what the field means. I mean, I value a broad picture of what the field means and a broad picture of what is available, and then details of these different programs, because I don't think it needs to be converged. In fact, I think there's a risk in trying to converge to one thing that we miss out on a lot of opportunities. I think we have researchers doing really interesting work in robotics. We have a person who's been working with me and contributing to the Polyworld software is actually doing some minor tweaking of the Polyworld source code to try to look at evolving natural language processing systems. I'm trying to turn around and use the data that I've generated on evolving neural network architectures to study this relationship between structure and function of networks. They're a huge, wide range of opportunities for this kind of evolutionary thinking applied to science that I don't necessarily want to turn into a single vision.
No, I have to agree with you, and certainly, I mean, this is the statement you made when you were last on Biota Live, and I certainly agree with that. I don't think the purpose of the work group is necessarily to create a focused definition of what artificial life is. I think initially the issue with regards to surveying is actually just taking in the breadth of possibilities, and if every new artificial life course can give us new possibilities, then that needs to filter into every other course in some regard. I don't think this is going to be a narrow definitional thing at all. I don't think, personally, and I'm sure you're in agreement with this, artificial life can survive with a narrow definition. It needs to be inclusive, continually inclusive, as new things come along. Otherwise, the whole momentum associated with artificial life so far will be lost. So I have to agree with you that I don't want to say, this is artificial life, this is not, through the aims of the work group. The aims of the work group are saying, this is artificial life being taught, this is wonderful. Have you considered also these things as well? Look at this person over there that is doing this kind of stuff. The history of artificial life, I found this with Noble Ape, I'm not sure you have with Polyworld, but there was a time when Noble Ape wasn't considered an artificial life simulation through these very strict definitions of what artificial life was. And I've been welcomed in and included in the artificial life community, having started developing Noble Ape probably 3 or 4 years in. I think it was when I was invited to speak at Biota 3 was when I first felt really welcomed into the artificial life community. I've been developing Noble Ape for about 4 years by that time. So I'd hate to think people listening in were thinking this is a closing down of the term where, knuckling down to try and get funding in for this very tight definition, or, start teaching a very tight definition, because that hasn't been the history of artificial life, and it wouldn't be true to the term to start doing that at this stage. I think, if anything, what we're looking for is seeing the breadth of what is being taught currently and giving some assistance with regards to perhaps we will find artificial life courses which are very tightly taught, and we will give assistance to them to be able to explore the scope and the breadth of the current field as it continues to develop. Because, we have Oliver in the chat room. You obviously have students coming through on a regular basis. The resources that we're trying to create here are really for the next generation of artificial life developers, artificial life academics, to move the field even further. And this is what interests me with regards to the industry component as well, because when I set up the group, I imagined that there would probably be about a 2/3, 1/3 ratio of folks in academia versus folks in industry. And the industry group, I've contacted a dozen people this week who I know use artificial life-related stuff, folks at Apple and Intel, folks in the pharmaceutical industry, who I know use aspects of artificial life and what they do. And the movement of the industry folk in has been a little slower than I'd hoped. We have about 43 members on the work group currently, and it's growing quite well. But with regards to the outreach to industry, this is still something we need to do more heavily. So in terms of the students that you see coming through, you've mentioned this with regards to students that have gone into industry. How do you see the balance with regards to teaching artificial life for a student that will obviously go on and use it in industry, Larry?
Well, the way I teach artificial life in particular is sort of developing a set of fundamental knowledge areas. I use almost exclusively seminal papers in information theory and neural networks, genetic algorithms, and so I try to weave that all together into a picture that says, okay, this is an interesting way to study and understand living systems and ultimately even intelligent systems. But I do, in fact, try to sort of I think it's essential, the way I want to approach the field, to bring in these important technology areas and areas of knowledge that I've had students go on to MIT and tell me that this course was the best thing that they had in their undergraduate to prepare them for the graduate career they chose. So I think we can do really cool, interesting, fun things, and, oh, by the way, learn a lot about really important technology areas.
Very true, very true. We have a caller from New Mexico on the line. Hello, caller.
Hi, this is Stephen Guerin with Redfish in the Santa Fe Complex.
Wonderful, Stephen. As this is your first time on Biota Live, would you like to introduce yourself and your interest in artificial life?
Yeah, thanks for, I've been, I attended Biota 3 in San Jose, maybe in 99, and a few artificial life conferences in Los Angeles and Reed College. Worked with Bios Group, which was a commercial spin out of the Santa Fe Institute in the early 2000s. Was in Stu Kaufman's research group, looking at, I would say, next generation artificial life, after evolutionary computation, looking at more what Stu was calling autonomous agents, with kind of more metabolic approaches to artificial life, looking at ideas in work and heat. Since that time, we have a nonprofit here in Santa Fe called the Santa Fe Complex that looks at kind of the marriage between art, science, and technology. It's on the old campus of the Swarm, where Chris Langton's offices were. So we have we used to repair the rail cars here in the turn of the century last year. So it's a cool little co-op kind of going here. And I teach agent-based modeling in the Complex Systems Summer School up at Santa Fe Institute during the summers, and we apply agent modeling and visualization for commercial clients. And on the research side, we are still kind of pursuing kind of new ideas of artificial life, applications of artificial life.
Very cool.
Thanks for letting me be here. Cool.
Not a problem. So you were really on the cusp of this teaching for industry. I mean, would you like to talk about the kind of folk that you have come through and what they go on to do with their artificial life-related studies?
What was the first part of the question?
So, I mean, part of the work group was to create an outreach into industry, and I imagine that
right.
The people that you have coming through many of them have aspirations in industry and go on to pursue it with some artificial life-related knowledge. Could you talk to some examples associated with that?
Right. So I think the early days applying artificial life meant more kind of evolutionary computation, doing search and optimization for companies and governments. These days we're looking at kind of how can we so I think data visualization is related, not exactly a complete sweet spot with artificial life. So I would be very interested, though, in working on the work group of here's kind of the value proposition to industry, and here's how artificial life can be applied. Currently it's kind of more how can complexity or complex systems thinking be applied, network dynamics, kind of graph theory, agent-based modeling. I think, but the longer term, the real potential is kind of bringing in ideas of artificial life. And
in terms of the framing of 40 years of Conway's life coming up next year, I mean, the Swarm Group obviously has some of its legacy to things like Conway's life and obviously earlier cellular automata and the movement into agent-based modeling. Can you talk about the opportunities that 40 years of Conway's life give to the stuff that you've done so far in terms of talking about how artificial life has impacted a wide variety of areas?
I think the two big things, so in the beginning is getting people to it's a change in perspective that, very small, simple rules can give rise to emergent patterns, which I think Conway is one of the best examples that we can show, or a flocking model. And that lets people to change their focus when they're running organizations to focusing on the interaction rules and less about optimizing and telling people what to do, moving away from a command and control, and more of getting toward getting the interaction rules in the organization right, and recognizing emergence when it appears, and just getting a vocabulary going within the organization. So I think that's one of the bigger contributions from Conway.
Certainly. And I also think, the length of time, 40 years is a good amount of time to actually show a level of maturity associated with these ideas. And I think in a historical perspective, it gives a great opportunity for people such as yourself, myself, obviously Larry, to talk about this and a greater kind of reflective perspective about how these things have impacted our own professional development and where it has taken us. But we do have the benefit of Oliver on the line. Hello, Oliver.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. So we've been using you as an example in terms of someone who's looking for a place to study in the very near future. How do you see artificial life, and how would you like to study artificial life in the future?
Well, currently I'm an artist and a developer here in New York City, and recently I read Stephen Levy's book, Artificial Life, just on a whim. And it really opened my eyes to this new field, and I just thought it was an interesting opportunity to sort of explore artificial life in an art context. So I started reading a lot about artificial life uses in art. Mitchell Whitelaw's book Metacreation was a key book in that, and Peter Bentley's huge textbooks were also key in that. Anything by William Latham, his book was also an interesting book on that. So for me, artificial life just seems to be another avenue for creative exploration, and that's sort of where I'm coming from at this point.
I'm not sure in terms of the time frame with regards to your reading and where you are currently, but do you see, in terms of your prior artistic history, there is a long history of the artificial life art community, and certainly for the previous two Vita Prizes we had judges on. We haven't had for the most recent Vita Prize. But have you discovered the artificial life art community in a similar time frame?
Yeah, I actually emailed John McCormack because I couldn't get a hold of his book. He published a book in Australia about 5 years ago, and I couldn't get a hold of it anywhere, so I just emailed him and sort of talked to him about it. But otherwise, yeah, I feel like there is definitely a community of artists that use artificial life. And they seem, John McCormack seemed very friendly,
Certainly. Well, growing up in Australia, John McCormack was a real inspiration to me, and he's someone I consider quite a good friend. And his ability to outreach to the Australian community was very great, and obviously he has an impact on artificial life artists the world over. So, I mean, big shout out to John here, because I think the work that he has done for at least 15 years has certainly inspired people such as yourself and myself. So it's wonderful to have people like him in the community. In terms of the work group specifically, I have to apologize. I think I misintroduced you. There was a fellow with a similar name who was also on the work group, the nature of 40-plus people on the work group. But in terms of your coming to the work group, what was your broader interest?
Well, I wanted to volunteer in two different work groups. The first one was the media outreach work group. I have an MFA in photography, and I do a lot of design work where I work at. So I felt like possibly I could be useful in developing a lot of the material that could be sent out, a lot of the graphic stuff, and also I wanted to volunteer in the teaching work group, mainly so that I would have a good opportunity to talk to a lot of the academics that I would assume or presume to be in that work group, just to learn more from them and to just sort of really soak up the knowledge that's out there. And
well, you have two current academics on the line in terms of Stephen and Larry. What kind of questions would you have for them? Well,
I'm not quite sure which gentleman was speaking earlier, but he had mentioned a class that he was teaching for undergraduates, that he was using a lot of seminal papers and information theory and things like that. I would love to get a list of that, or to get his curriculum or his syllabus, so that I can independently find those papers and read them on the subway, because that's where I do a lot of my reading is on the subway.
I understand. If let's say perhaps I can use the work group for this. How is that, Tom? If I
that's the plan.
I think I've already put something on there with a link to information about the course, and I can't remember exactly what's there. Let's see, academic teaching. Well, I'll make sure that the work group has a link to a web page that has all those references on it.
Great.
So perhaps actually generating this kind of reading list would be a critical part of the teaching special interest group anyway, so academics could share resources, and particularly when we talk about the diversity of papers, even seminal papers, there are probably 3 or 4 decent-sized courses alone that could touch on the seminal papers of artificial life going back in history and philosophy and in mathematics and computation.
Oh, undoubtedly.
So I think generating that kind of list on the Workgroup's wiki would be of great benefit, just to, as you say, tickle the minds of other people that are teaching artificial life-related courses about the potential of seminal papers.
It would be a nice resource. And I wanted to mention to Oliver, have you run across Carl Sims's not the blocky creatures work, which is wonderful in its own regard, but his specifically his evolving art work?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah, that's I've read as much of his work as I can possibly find on the web.
Good. Good plan. I think that was it Stephen, the from Arizona, from spinoff of SFI? Is that?
Yes.
I missed the very beginning of the name, and okay, good. I picked that up. You mentioned that one of your missions there is art related, so I suspect that you have some things Oliver might be interested in.
So if you go to sfcomplex.org is kind of our nonprofit art, science, and technology kind of group. I think more on the technology side, some of the tools that we're using, things that might be of interest. Processing.org is a free thing to download and mess with. NetLogo actually has some basic visualization capabilities. It's really easy to get up and running with. You can get Game of Life for sure running in there, but all kinds of different agent-based toolkits, and it's very good with students. At the lower middle school level, StarLogo TNG is what we're teaching middle school students. It's very approachable in a couple hours, and it's a drag-and-drop composable block language out of MIT. So it's
is that the Scratch project that they're doing? Oh, great, cool.
And they've moved it more into agent-based modeling with 3D game characters. So it's targeted at the middle school level. Then I think in general we're just also interested in more projectors and cameras and people interacting in spaces now. Now and then starting to bring in more autonomous agents into that space and with people.
I worked on a project with an artist and musician at Indiana University, with Norbert Herber, and we did a project that involved projection onto the ceiling of a flocking simulation. Nice simple algorithm we're all familiar with. And it was basically by completely darkening a little alcove, a little room, and black carpeting, black drapes on the walls, and then just having these things swarming on the ceiling. We put some pillows on the floor and made it. People actually seemed to really enjoy lying in there and watching it. And what I always thought was intriguing about it was the agents flying around were not remotely natural looking. They were just little polygonal bodies. And yet the motion was extremely organic and natural looking. And I think that contrast sort of resonated with people. How could something so artificial be so natural? And it was a really fun project to work on. I did it just because I could and had a lot of fun with it. So I'm curious to see what more things come out of that projected environments using A-Life techniques.
Right, yeah. And I think people really respond, as you say, like the Carl Sims stuff is going back to the blocky creatures. They're very much blocky, but the motion itself is
right,
very compelling. Yeah.
I think it's actually hard to find an artificial life simulation which isn't in some regard relaxing. I mean, I've certainly spent a lot of time looking at Jeffrey Ventrella's work. I think the blockies are. People say that they watch the Noble Ape brain simulation as a means of relaxation. I think there's something fundamentally, I don't know, whether it's too out there with regards to brain, waves or what have you, but I think there's something that's fundamentally relaxing about watching artificial life simulation. Bruce, we have the benefit of you on the line. We'll get an EvoGrid update at the end of the call, if that's possible, to kind of extract you from the EvoGrid for a minute. But you've just come from Flint. Can you describe what Flint is, how they operate, and do they do any teaching, or are they purely a research organization?
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah, Flint is a research organization dedicated to creating chemical protocells. So they really have a tall order in front of them. They're going out into the world and doing a lot of presentations, and they have a mixture of simulation and laboratory chemistry.
Through the work group, I think some of the stuff that was generated, particularly in terms of soft artificial life, wet artificial life, hard artificial life, the teaching of, what interested me with regards to the Flint audio that you provided was the sense that there is a need for soft artificial life to be taught in some areas, a hard artificial life to be taught in some areas, even to these kind of researchers, that we can all learn from the stuff that is coming out of the work group. And I think this seems to be echoed in the call today, that even folks who are teaching artificial life currently can always learn from other areas. In terms of so there's no teaching component associated with Flint, but does Steen and do other members of the group still teach in the university?
I don't believe they do. I think they're full-time. They have a 3 or 4 year remaining on their grant to do this protocell. That's it. Yeah.
All the way forward. So in terms of wet artificial life teaching, Larry or Stephen, do you have a sense of how wet artificial life is currently being taught? Is it all at graduate level? Is this something that can be integrated into the work group?
Mostly, the only areas of this that I'm aware of are either, intense research efforts a la a protocell, or there's been a lot of work, I think, at the graduate level with various solutions of oils and things that I sort of got dragged into a little bit because of a friend, Rachel Armstrong, and her strong interest in it, and the some presentations that went on at Artificial Life 11, and I'm not deeply aware of this area at all, but there seemed to be a whole lot of there seems to be a lot of interest in trying to approach these protocells from a purely chemical basis, as distinct from protocells' approach to sort of a real physical space genetic algorithm trying to operate and bring about a protocell. And they're getting some interesting results. They're getting, chemotaxis and cell, what sort of looks from the outside like cell division even occasionally, but there's nothing quite yet that's sort of propagating from one generation to the next. We're not getting variation and selection going yet. So it's not something that is quite to the level of living organisms yet. But on the other, there's been some such interesting work looking at. Sorry, I wish my memory of these things was better. But people talked about hydrothermal vents in the ocean for a long time and looked at some of these really hot smokers. But there's a different kind, an alkaline or something that is not as high a temperature, and some really good evidence that it provides nice environment for the collection of essentially protocells, because you get all the ingredients that ultimately end up inside a cell, but without having to have its own membrane yet. And then as the membranes form, these things get spewed out into the ocean, and it's looking like a very good candidate for the origins of natural life. And some of those things lead to experimental ideas about what the right combination of ingredients and what the right environmental conditions are to foster these sorts of protocells. So anyway, sorry, I got off on talking about the technology. The specific researchers all seem to be at the graduate level that I'm aware of.
Certainly. But, I think there's potential in the future, particularly as the media picks up on the wet artificial life phenomena, that you will have students coming through that have at least a passing interest in wet artificial life, and I think it's critical that the work group has a component. With Mark Bordeaux involved, it would be almost impossible for us not to,
right?
that had some component with regards to potentially even the undergraduate teaching of the basics of wet artificial life. The thing that always interests me is this idea of a shared API that Mark talks about, that in fact soft artificial life simulators can move into the shared API with regards to wet artificial life too, and I think there's an element of the Evo grid in that too, Bruce. So we may let you loose on the Evo grid in about 20 minutes, but we'll wrap up the call up until that point. So in terms of the potential for the work group in the future, we have a few perspectives on the call. We've talked a little bit about the industry, but we haven't really talked about the value problems specifically. Oliver, as you read, as you get a sense of what artificial life is, what would you describe the value of artificial life as being?
Oh, that's a toughie. I think for me, artificial life is how do I say it? It just seems to be one of the big questions. It seems to sort of touch on one of the big questions of what it means to be human, but we do it in a way it's sort of a proxy for that, for me anyway. It kind of defines us as human beings as well, just because we have a certain kind of cognitive efficacy to even imagine and sort of assert a will towards creating something like that. So for me, it just seems to sort of illustrate what it means to be human. It's such a tough question.
No, I understand. I think that's why, in even raising it as a topic for the work group, my view is that it will take, half a dozen philosophers and others probably a few years to really grapple the full ramifications. I want to give two implicit examples of this because I see Gerald Jung in the chat, and Gerald and I have talked about this in the past in previous recordings for the Biota podcast, and the thing that comes through firstly is that artificial life, in terms of when you take all these things together, and the good example is wet artificial life with regards to soft artificial life, it's really quite difficult to find a Venn between the two if you look at them in a very abstract way, yet they're very much part of the same term. And the thing that I put back to Gerald almost as a quip is artificial life is what people say is artificial life. It's fundamentally that. But the other thing that I find interesting from what you describe, and certainly I feel this for the artificial life community as well, as an external observer, as someone as you come close to the artificial life community, you start to see very fascinating people. We have a few of them on the call today, in my own experience, and in fact, all of you basically. And when you come to this community, as you approach it, you see people like Larry, you see people like Steen, you see people like Bruce, you see people like Stephen, you see all these people that have very divergent areas of interest, but have some shared kind of collective goal. And I think the value can be described in a number of ways. But really the collective intellectual interests and the fact that people with quite diverging interests can have this shared element is really the thing that is artificial life, and that's the thing that the value problem needs to describe. So you don't necessarily need to be so close to the community in order to see the value. That's the critical thing, because everyone within the community has a kind of implicit understanding of what the value is. It's just translating that into something explicit. Larry, you teach people with regards to artificial life. You inspire people with regards to artificial life. How would you begin to start tackling the value problem?
Well, there's two ways to approach what the value problem, if I'm using the term correctly. One is the sort of intellectual, philosophical value, which is, sort of undeniably grand. It's the nature of life itself. That goes back to, I think, the original thinking, Chris Langton, about understanding what it is to be alive at all and how to approach that scientifically. Then there is the other value problem. How can the research directions that we engage in order to address this fundamental philosophical issue bring value to industry, bring value to the other sciences? And so I'm sort of the intellectual philosophical value seems just wonderfully blind, incredibly obvious to me. The one I think we actually should spend some time on is making sure that we, I think as Chris Langton again said way back quite early on, we need to give back. We need to give something back to the other sciences and bring the insights that come out of our researches in artificial life back into biochemistry and, as my friend's doing, natural language processing, areas that can actually help industry and science in general. In fact, I'd be curious if it's not giving away too much, Stephen, who are some of your clients, or maybe what are some of the types of clients that you're dealing with in industry? I'd like to know specifically what they expect to get out of it, what they intend to apply it to when they get back home.
Yes, not at all secret. So I think agent-based modeling and visualization are kind of where the smaller incremental steps are coming as you apply artificial life. So I think it's kind of more.
Those do apply quite broadly.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of a lot of what we're doing. But our further reaching goal is how do you now start treating organizations as living systems? Our definition is kind of starting more from the Stu Kaufman's all living systems do work cycles perspective, kind of away from evolutionary computations in there, but it's more of a metabolic approach. And there's some people in the 80s in the ecological psychology is a discipline that looked at as a thermodynamic work cycles were foundations to cognition, which was a kind of weird thing to unpack. It took a long time. It took some time to kind of think about how that applies to software. What does work and heat mean in software?
Right.
But in the applied side, I know some projects we're working with the San Francisco, looking at how kids move through the youth mental health system. We modeled the criminal justice system in the UK, the Home Office there. One of our favorite projects is we're modeling boat traffic in the city of Venice, Italy. So we get to ride around on boats and model the canals. But it's a lot of times it's agents moving on graphs of one type or another and visualizing them and letting people getting a sense of what is, and then then running what if scenarios. But so it's a small step to what I would think is the larger. I think the promise is how can you really start dealing with these systems as adapting to their environment and doing real work.
And in terms of what you're doing currently, can you project in 10 years' time the kind of things that you'll be doing, and do you get a sense of what the future holds for artificial life outreach into industry? What would you like to be doing in 10 years' time with this? Let's put it that way.
So I think I would like certainly the toolkits to be better, both on the visualization and modeling sides. I would like to have a stronger theory of artificial life in this metabolic space. Ideas of symmetry and symmetry breaking as they relate to constraint construction organizations. I don't know. I guess I would like a stronger understanding. Yes, we're still grappling.
And Bruce, in terms of the amazing polymaths in artificial life, I mean, my inspiration in some regard, and I know yours too, comes from Freeman Dyson. When you look at someone like Freeman Dyson, and in terms of his general and broader thinking, in terms of simulation, in terms of ideas in artificial life, what do you think the field could learn from Freeman, and how do you think the value problem can be expressed through Freeman's thinking?
Well, ironically, last time I was sitting down with Freeman on the Evil Grid project earlier this year, he turned to me and he said, "My one great regret of my career is that I never got into computing, i.e. I never wrote any code, I never built any software systems. I looked at it all happening here at the Institute with von Neumann's machine, but I never did it. And when I look at his toy universe model in Origin of Life, in the first and second editions, that's kind of a prescription for writing an artificial origin of life system in software. So he was doing it in mathematics, but wanted to do it in software. So in a sense, the toy universe's approach of completely fundamental emergence is inspired by Freeman and his desire to have tested some of his models that are in mathematics.
And in terms of your broader surveying of artificial life, and obviously starting Biota and these kind of things, you've obviously considered the value problem at various points along the journey, so to speak. What's your current thinking in terms of the value of artificial life and how you express that to an external community?
Well, the way I prefer to explain it is really not watering down the visionary component and trying to come up with, fairly vertical and small applications, but starting with the public with the total vision. And I would liken it to explaining to why we're going into space. Why we're going to space, it did have some commercial spin-offs, but the primary thing that everyone groks about that is that it's for the human soul and the human spirit, that it's the vision for our species, some degree of pride and national chest pounding, but really we're doing it because it's a unique thing we can do in the universe. And for my nickel, artificial life is about that same kind of exploration. It's probing back into time to ask the question of how could we have emerged from non-living parts? What does that mean for our understanding of creation and religions and spiritual beliefs, and why did the universe cough up living systems? Is there spirit in those systems? I mean, it's as I think was said earlier, it's about being alive as a species and having sentience, and that's why we need to do it. So that's how I tend to approach it. And of course, there are a huge number of spin-offs, as there has been from space technology.
Understanding who we are as a living race is you could hardly have a more fundamental question.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, we have a lot of people in the chat room that are putting in their own particular visions with regards to the future of artificial life, and I'd like to thank the chat room in particular. For folks who are interested in participating in the work group, just go to biota.org/podcast. There is a mailing list associated with the work group, and you'll be able to see some of the folks who are involved. Larry, you're not on the mailing list currently, but you're kind of taking a precursory. You're really surveying the work of the work group currently.
Actually, I thought I had, by registering with the wiki, I thought I was officially there, but...
consider yourself officially there, then. We have had a number of people that have signed up to the work group mailing list who are interested in surveying it, and I'd also like to say that that's fine as well. Larry, I was going to use you as an example of that, but you are very much an active participant, and it's wonderful to have you as part of the work group. This is going to be an ongoing discussion through the Biota Live format. We're going to have people on a regular basis to talk about it, and just through the impact of the chat room. And I think Bruce and I have been on a number of Biota Lives previously, but the energy that's coming into this work group seems to indicate that this is clearly a shared objective for the artificial life community. And it's wonderful to have the opportunity to distill that through talking with Mark Badeau initially. So, Bruce, you've been traveling recently. You've done some stuff associated with the EvoGrid. I think folks in the listening audience would love to hear an EvoGrid update. How are things going currently?
Well, some fundamental things have happened in an unusual way. Dick Gordon, who, as people may know from previous podcasts, is the brain, the inspirer behind the EvoGrid project, drove 1,500 miles pulling his 26 or 30-foot travel trailer, arrived in Santa Cruz on the coast here Wednesday night, and I went and spent most of the day with him and his wife and their 2 dogs on Thursday. And we sat down at the little, Formica table and worked for hours on the EvoGrid and came up with some real fundamental innovations that I think finally close the loop on the EvoGrid and allow it to become a simulation that doesn't have the holes punched in it of potential accusations of intelligent design, i.e., and just a real brief explanation, that the observers looking for interesting phenomena, the observer functions are in themselves going to be developed through evolutionary techniques. So the observers are part of the system, and this is what Dick Gordon calls the evolution or the arising of perception. So like the von Neumann machine at the Institute in the 1950s, we're going to not have any patch cords in here, folks. It's got to be a completely self-referential system. So if stuff happens in there, it's observed by little widgets that are themselves subject to evolutionary development.
In terms of the Dick Gordon Roadshow, he's making his way down to spend some time with William R. Buckley currently. I fielded an email from him yesterday. I don't think I'll be leaving Las Vegas in the near future, but I think that roadshow will certainly contribute a lot back into the EvoGrid project, and I look forward to hearing future updates from you, Bruce, with regards to it, because obviously the EvoGrid, do you call it, how's the EvoGrid's relationship with Biota, as you say it explicitly? Is it a sub-project, a project of Biota? Is it something that runs in parallel to Biota? What's your current thinking?
I think of it as a fundamental Biota project.
Well, I'd like to thank the participants today, Stephen and Oliver in particular, because you're both new participants. It's wonderful to have new folks involved with Biota Live, and also thank you for your participation in the work group as well. I think the issues associated with media and the value problem are going to be ones that are periodic and returned to, and certainly Larry and Stephen both have talked about their own particular interests with regards to how to propagate the message of artificial life through teaching, and I think that's a fundamental aim of the work group as well. So a short Biota Live today, primarily because it's being recorded on Saturday morning, but due to the immense feedback, I think the Saturday morning time format works very well. We've had a number of folk from the East Coast and from Europe in the chat room, including Eric Burton, Gerald de Jong, Ryan Flanagan, who I believe is in Japan, and, of course, Rudolf Benikoff from the Netherlands. So I'd like to thank all the folks in the chat. I'd like to thank the folks who've participated in the call. And thanks in particular to the listeners. Please participate in the work group. Go to biota.org/podcast and get involved. Thank you very much.